This is the SpeedyBee Mario frame, and when I reviewed it a little while back, I was pretty freaking impressed with it. In fact, I was so impressed that today I'm going to build it out into a whole quadcopter that I can fly. And I'm even more excited. I mean, any day I get to build a quadcopter is a good day, but this build is also going to be the opportunity for me to try out these motors. These motors are from a relatively new company called VCI Hobby. And when I first found out about VCI Hobby, I thought, oh great, another Chinese company making motors. But they're making really good motors. And, I mean, I don't know if this is a coincidence, but that's like my exact color scheme. So yeah, I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. All right, here we go. Let's do a little punch. Yeah, it gets up there. It's always really hard to judge motors just based on flight because there's so many variables when flying. Feels good. I'm not noticing any issues. Feels fast. Like issues like the PID tune being messed up. My kid's having a birthday party. That's why that foam pit's there. Oh yeah, I'm liking this. The first thing you guys are going to notice is that the SpeedyBee Mario frame is already somewhat assembled, and that's because I put it together when I did the original review of the frame. If you want to watch the full review of this frame and go into all the things I like and a few things I dislike about it, I'll put a link in the video description. You can go check that out. But in short, this frame is, number one, it is suspiciously competitively priced. It is really inexpensive. And for a frame in this price range, you might expect to get a really bare bones frame, but you really don't. I mean, you could just see it's got a metal front end. It's got a freaking air intake to help cool the flight stack. I don't know if that's just a gimmick or if it actually works, but it sure looks cool. It's got very detailed 3D prints. In fact, right now I am at this moment printing a 3D print for the DJI O3 Air unit that I'm going to be putting in this bird. And they're all available to download and print, not just for you to buy. So just SpeedyBee have done an incredible job of building a capable, economical, and community-focused frame. I can't wait to build it out. Let's take a closer look at these motors from VCI Hobby. And I'm just so impressed with the manufacturing on these motors. Like, look at how neat those windings are. They are single strand windings, as you can tell. And they're so neat. Like normally you only see windings that straight and neat on 3D render of the motor that shows up on the website, not the actual motor. The machining on the bell, just very, very nice motor just to look at. And you can see a lot of care has been taken in its construction. The magnets, and you can see that the magnets are curved magnets, also known as arc magnets. And the reason that's good is that a flat magnet, it is further away from the stator at the edge of the magnet, and then it's closer to the stator at the center of the magnet, and then it's further away from the stator at the edge of the magnet again. So the magnetic field is a little bit sort of wobbly as the motor spins, whereas an arc magnet, well, number one, you can get the air gap tighter because the magnet doesn't have to sort of clear the stator, and number two, the magnetic field is smoother, so some people think that makes the motors more powerful, more efficient, smoother. I don't know about any of that, but generally arc magnets are a sign that a manufacturer is trying to make a better motor. Another thing that you can't see about these motors is that they are the only motor with 0.1 millimeter stator laminations. Stator laminations, so the actual thing that the windings are wrapped around is called the stator, and it's made up of laminations of, I think it's steel. I'm not an expert on motor construction. And the thinner those laminations, the more steel you get into the core, and the more magnetic flux the motor can generate, and just generally the more powerful and better the motor is. Chris Rosser has actually tested VCI Hobby motors in his test rig. I'll put a link to those motors, to those results in the video description if you want to go check it out. I do need to point something out, and that is, 2306 would not normally be my choice for a 5-inch. 2306 is okay, but 2207 is just a little bit more optimal in terms of its height versus radius versus volume. You just get a little bit better performance out of a 2207, at least on paper. In reality, I don't think people could, I'm sure that I can't tell the difference. And that's why I'm picking this one just based on its color, even though I would normally choose a 2207 if I had to pick from just from scratch. All right, the motors are installed. Yeah, I can't help but remember a time when I would have showed you all the screws going in and talked about like, oh, if your motor screws are too long, they'll destroy your motors. And make sure your wires come out the right direction, and all these little details for people who'd never built a quadcopter before. If you have never built a quadcopter before and you're following along with this video, well, more power to you. But I actually have a video series specifically intended for someone who's never built a quadcopter before, where I go into all the little details and take you through the entire setup of the whole quadcopter from start to finish without skipping over anything like I'm going to do in this video. There's a link to that down in the video description below if you'd like to check that out. Highly recommended if you've never built before. The ESC and flight controller for this build are going to be the SpeedyBee ESC and flight controller. Of course, why not? And the first thing we're going to do is slide the flight controller, or ESC rather, down onto the flight control stack, just like so. And normally I would be checking like the spacing of the stack and everything to make sure it was okay, but if this flight controller and ESC can't go on this frame, then something ain't right with the world. I might normally solder on the XT60, the battery lead, before putting the ESC in the frame, because like getting my soldering iron in here is going to be a little bit tricky. But this one actually has a channel down here for the wire to go, and I think I'm going to want to solder this in place, and it's going to go in here. Yeah, see, I could have the XT60 come out the front, but I kind of don't like to do that, because it gets in the way of the GoPro, if indeed you decide to run with a GoPro. When the GoPro tilts back, the battery wire's in the way. I kind of don't like it. So I think it's going to go in the back. And we've got this 3D print here. I'm actually going to redo this 3D print for the O3 antenna, which this is not the 3D print that goes with the O3 antenna. But we'll fix that. So I actually have these bags of accessories that SpeedyBee sent me. These are like the extra upgrade pro bags. They're all available from the SpeedyBee website. And most of them are available. You can just print them on your own. But one of the pieces that it comes with is this bulkhead connector for the rear of the quad. And it's going to go in like this. It's pretty slick. And that means that when this goes on here, it's going to be completely restrained and just plug right in there on the back. And you don't have to worry about getting your battery lead chopped. It's pretty slick. It's pretty slick. But it will mean I'll have to solder a brand new XT60 connector instead of using the pre-made one. But my philosophy is that if you're scared of a little soldering, then you just get the heck out of the room. I refuse to be deterred by the need to solder something. Soldering should be zero effort. Philosophically believe that to be true, and I'm going to live that reality right now. Whenever I solder an XT60, I just twist these sideways like that. I think it makes it easier to just keep the solder in them while you're soldering. Okay, a little puddle of flux just sitting there. Sure, why not? If you think this third hand tool I'm using is the coolest thing in the world, It is from a company called OmniFixo. You can see it upside down there. OmniFixo. I'll put a link in the video description of their website. I don't get a commission or anything. I just think it's a very cool product. That'll do. And I'm going to put some heat shrink on this just to be safe. See, that didn't take that long. Editor, how long did that take? We'll go ahead and work this back into the print. I'm going to replace this print, as I said, later, but with one that fits the O3 antenna, but this will do for now. And now these will drop down into this little canyon here and be out of the way of the video transmitter when we finally install it. So it does mean that we're going to have to cut these pretty precisely to the correct length. Now this build comes with a big old capacitor, but where's that supposed to go? Does it go here? Because I feel like if it does, then it's going to be in the way of the video transmitter. That's right, I remember. It goes in here. But how? Do I have to take the frickin' bottom plate off? I do. Oh, Speedy Bee. Yeah, so one of the cool things about this frame is that it has a little cavity down here for the capacitor. That's cool. Because as you can see on a normal frame, you'd put the capacitor back here and you wouldn't have room because the video transmitter's right here. So then you have to jump through all kinds of hoops to make it work. That's really cool. But like seriously, apparently I got to pull the whole bottom plate. Really? All right, so then capacitor goes in and this goes back on. But why will it not? It won't go on. Why won't it go on? What's stopping it from going down? The capacitor is too freaking big. This is your frame, and this is your capacitor that you included with your flight controller. So if it doesn't fit, I'm going to be very annoyed. This is the thing I like the least about this frame is you have to freaking... no, it 100% doesn't fit. What the frick, Speedy Bee? It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. See, the capacitor's too big. I mean, I'm not mad. You include a big capacitor. Big capacitors are good. But, like, your frame should hold the capacitor that goes with your... We're just going to go to a different one. Okay. So a reasonably sized capacitor will fit through the hole. That capacitor wouldn't fit because it was too freaking big. So I can put the frame back together without having to squeeze the capacitor in. That's good. Speedy Bee. I like your frame, Speedy Bee, but Jesus. Like, does no one think about the actual common man trying to actually put this together the time that they design it? Like, I know, let's put a little side plate here, or let's put a little whatever. And then, like, do you not have an actual human put it together and they go, hey, this is annoying. Like, can we not do this? And then you go, okay, let's redesign it. Oh, God. See? It's freaking... Oh, I got it. I got it. I got it. I think I got it. I didn't have it. What I'm going to actually do is I'm going to install this on the underside of the ESC. So there's actually these two tiny little holes here made for the capacitor, positive and negative, and I'm just going to pass it through there. So now we've got it there. We kind of made a mess over here, but we'll work with that. Actually, I think I'd like to... I could have cut those off before I started working them down in, I guess. Let's get it closer. And then we're just going to bend this over like so it rests against the ESC. And I'm going to see how that goes. See, I didn't put any heat shrink on these leads, which could be a problem. Yes, I have completely screwed this up. It is not pushed far back enough, and it will not go all the way down in. I have to do it again. Great. Now we've got another capacitor installed, and this time with heat shrink, and let's see how well she does. We'll just lay that back. Flat against the bottom. Fingers crossed. And we hope it lays straight down in that little slot. I really freaking hope that doesn't pop off when I solder on the XT60. Well, only one way to find out. Everything appears to be in place. I'm really glad I heat shrinked the legs of the capacitor because they were 100% touching the frame and they would short circuit and it would be bad. But everything seems to be intact. You know, like this is the trade-off of frames that try to be clever. Because like, oh, it's clever. We have a clever place to put your capacitor. And oh, we have a clever place to put your XT60. But it means that as you're building, that's where you got to put it. You can't just like solder it up and just zip tie it somewhere. And it actually makes the build more complicated. Like you're trying to solve a problem, but you sort of created another problem. I'm going to go ahead and solder up these motor wires. And there's nothing really unique or original about that. So I'm not going to make you watch me do it. And again, if this is your first build and you're looking for more instructions, link in the video description to my beginner build series. All right, well, good news. The motors are all soldered up and looking good. And the next step was to get this mount, which is properly sized, properly designed for the O3 camera. Yay. It is necessary to disconnect the O3 camera, the O3 antenna. It is necessary to disconnect the O3 antenna from the O3 air unit to run the cables through the antenna holder. And the reason I'm speaking in such a soft tone is that I'm slowly losing my mind because the next thing I went to do was mount the O3. And look how nice. Oh, we've got these mounting holes. Why, it even comes with some little screws that you can use to hold the O3 air unit down. And sure enough, as soon as we put it in place, what we can see is that these clever little wires that go down into the clever little canyon there, they're interfering with the, that's not going to work. So what the frick I'm supposed to do? I fear that they are too short and that no matter what I do, they will get in the way. But I'm going to try reflowing these solder joints and kind of reorienting these wires so they come straight downish, instead of outish, and see if that can make that work. The other thing I'll do, if this doesn't work, is I will add some spacers to raise the O3 up slightly. In fact, if I were building this for myself, that's probably just what I would do. But I feel like I owe it to you and to the frame to try to build it in the way that it's intended to be built. And before I just been like, F this. Still, it's a little hard to get the light in there so you can see, but there's still just a little bit of pressure, but it will go down and the ESC will sit flat. The other thing that's a little frustrating is that this wire here comes out and it is pressing there, but I think that will do. As long as the ESC will sit flat, I think it's okay. If I had this to do over again, I would probably have elected to use 14 gauge wires for the XT60 instead of 12 gauge. That would give just a little more flexibility and a little more room because it's literally just a smaller wire. I used 12 gauge because the factory connector came with 12 gauge and I thought I would look like a coward if I went down to 14 gauge. And I was like, well, I'm not scared of no soldering 12 gauge wires. I can do that. But to be honest with you, most of the time for an XT60, I would use 14 gauge. It's slightly higher resistance than 12 gauge, but it's not that much, especially because the distance we're talking about is only a few inches. Well, your friends use 12 gauge wire, would you? Apparently so, Mom. Now I will reinstall the antennas on this DJI O3, and we will take it from there. Now we got to decide how we're going to mount the O3 air unit, and the canonical way of doing it would be to remove these 4 screws, and SpeedyBee provides alternative screws that will go up through these holes in the bottom plate into the O3, and it will screw it into place. And that seems like a very good idea, but I kid you not, I have seen that. I know of a bind and fly manufacturer who mounted their units this exact way for a short while, and it was more common than you would like for the air unit to like rip in a crash, rip out of those screws. And basically that's holding the whole air unit apart together, and the air unit comes apart. So I don't trust that. It's theoretically possible that you could run a long screw all the way up through and put a nut on top. I'd be okay with that, but these are, I think these are like 1.6 millimeter screws, not M2, and I don't have any spares in that size. So that's out of the question. I think I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. I'm just going to stick it down and use a freaking zip tie. Oh, so ugly. For such an elegant frame, too, to just, ugh. But, like, I'm already annoyed at this shenanigans with the XT60 wire, so kind of like, nah, all your elegance is not as impressive as it might have been. Let's see, how do I get this damn thing out? Because that's also where we would normally mount the receiver antenna, but I only have Happy Model EP2 receivers because I was unprepared for this. And they don't have the external antenna. They have a small integrated antenna, so I don't need it. And yes, my range will be reduced, but... So, I'll just come right here with the old Alien tape. Alien tape, the best double-sided tape in the world. The tape has also given us just a little bit of lift. It's so thick, it's given us just a little bit more spacing there. And then we'll just get a couple of zip ties. We'll go around this sucker. Now, theoretically, you're also supposed to put your receiver here, but I'm having trouble seeing how you're going to put your receiver there if you've also put your XT60 wires there. Maybe the receiver only goes there if the XT60 came out the front. Fair enough. I'd be mighty tempted to make the XT60 go around the front if I hadn't already printed this beautiful mount and soldered on the bulkhead connector, so I feel like I'm kind of stuck with that decision. Hey, the yellow of the motors goes with the yellow of the SpeedyBee 3D prints. That's cool. So then the camera's going to go here, and these little inserts are going to go in the front plate. There are gray and yellow. The yellow ones feel softer, and I think they're for the O3 to be vibration absorbing. The O3 has built-in image stabilization, so it needs a little bit of vibration absorption. As for the flight controller, the good news is that there is already a plug on here that is made for the O3 air unit, so that will just plug in. We should make a note of what UART number the TX and the RX lines are coming off the O3. We could also just look at the SpeedyBee wiring diagram, but since it's right here in front of us, I will make a note that T1 and R1 are the gray and white wires. That's the TX and RX wires going to the O3. In addition, what I like to do is remove the yellow S-Bus wire, unless I was using the DJI hand controller, which I never am for a self-built drone. On this SpeedyBee flight controller, you can see it's labeled R2 S-Bus. And the problem is that we're going to put our receiver on UART2 here by soldering it to the top of the board. And if both the O3 and the receiver are on R2 at the same time, they will conflict and neither of them will work. So we'll just the yellow wire out of here. Could have done that before I plugged everything in. I would have been able to get out easier. But there you go. The last step then is to install the receiver. The receiver that I've gone with for this build is the Happy Model EP2 Express LRS receiver. The advantage of the EP2 receiver is that it has a built-in ceramic antenna, which means there's no antenna to mount on the outside. The downside is that that built-in ceramic antenna has reduced range compared to an external antenna. And the reason I've chosen it is because I went digging around in my drawers to find parts for this build, and I didn't have any of the other kind. I've got like 3 of the EP2s that I bought, and I was like, oh, what the hell, let's just use it. And that does complete the build. The only thing left to do now is take it over to the computer and configure it with Betaflight. But I'm not going to make you sit through that. I've done that stuff. And again, if you're looking for a tutorial, then you should just go watch my beginner build series. And if you're interested in watching my beginner build series, I'll put a link in the video description below, and in just a second, a card on screen as we watch a little more flying of this quadcopter. I think my beginner build series is the best way for you to learn to build and maintain an FPV drone using Betaflight. There is so much to learn in the world of FPV. How do you even know where to get started? How do you know which information you actually need to get yourself in the air and which stuff you can kind of put off learning till later? Because let's face it, you can't learn it all at once. My beginner build series is just the information you need to get you in the air, but not just like a hand holding, just do what I do and don't understand it. Just the information you need to actually, hopefully, understand it and be able, hopefully, to replicate it. I've got a card on screen and a link in the video description below. I hope I'll see you there.